There's a city in the Pacific Northwest, a city that has burned to the ground, rebuilt itself from the ashes, struck gold, launched the planes that won a world war, gave the world some of the most iconic music ever made, and then quietly became one of the most powerful tech capitals on Earth. That city is Seattle, and its story is unlike almost any other city in America.
I'm Narek, and today we're going to explore how Seattle was built, from a rainy, muddy settlement on the edge of the wilderness to the home of Amazon, Boeing, and the sound that changed rock music forever. Let's dive in.
Long before any settler ever set foot on its shores, the land that would become Seattle was home to the Duwamish people. They had lived in this region for thousands of years, fishing, hunting, trading, and by the time the first white settlers arrived, there were at least 17 Duwamish villages spread across the shores of Elliott Bay. Their leader was a man called Chief Seattle, or South in his own language, a figure of remarkable intelligence and diplomacy who would, in an irony of history, give his name to a city built largely at the expense of his own people. It's important to start here, because every city has a story that begins before the story we usually tell.
The founding of Seattle, as most histories tell it, begins on November 13, 1851.
A small group of settlers from Illinois, known as the Denny Party, arrived by boat at a point on the western shore of Elliott Bay called Alki Point. There were about 24 of them, and the moment they arrived, things did not go well. David Denny, who had scouted the location months earlier, greeted the incoming party with the words, "I wish you hadn't come." The cabin he'd promised to build was unfinished. The roof had no shingles. It was raining. Women in the party reportedly wept. They had named this little outpost New York Alki, New York by and by, as in, one day this will be as great as New York. It was an optimistic name for a roofless cabin in the rain. They didn't stay long at Alki. Within a few months, the settlers crossed Elliott Bay to the eastern shore, where the water was deeper and more protected, a better location for a port. That second settlement, near what is now Pioneer Square, would grow into the city of Seattle. Early Seattle was a logging town. The forests of the Pacific Northwest were enormous, towering Douglas firs and cedars that could be floated down to the waterfront and shipped south to San Francisco. That lumber trade was Seattle's first economy. A man named Henry Yesler built the city's first steam-powered sawmill right on the waterfront, and the road that led logs down the hill to it became known as the Skid Road, the origin of the phrase Skid Row that we still use today. The city grew. It was rough, chaotic, and full of the contradictions of frontier life. Churches next to brothels, ambitious civic leaders next to opportunistic land speculators. But it grew.
Then, on June 6, 1889, everything changed.
It started with a glue pot. A young carpenter's apprentice in a shop at the corner of Front and Madison Streets let his glue boil over onto wood chips. The fire he started spread fast, because Seattle was built almost entirely of wood, because the streets were made of wooden planks, and because when firefighters tried to fight the blaze, the private water system didn't have enough pressure to make the hoses effective. And when they ran to Puget Sound for water, the tide was out. In less than a day, 25 city blocks were gone. The entire central business district of Seattle had been reduced to ash. And here's where Seattle's story takes its first remarkable turn. The city didn't collapse. It rebuilt, faster and more ambitiously than before. Within a year, Seattle's population had actually grown by nearly 20,000 people, with workers flooding in to help reconstruct the city. But the rebuild came with a decision that created one of the strangest features of any city in America. The original Seattle had been built on tidal flats. The streets flooded regularly. Sewers backed up at high tide. So when they rebuilt, the city decided to raise the streets, in some places by more than 20 feet, building retaining walls on either side and filling the space in between. The result was that the old ground floor of the city, storefronts, sidewalks, basement passages, was buried alive, still there, still intact, just underground. Today, you can tour this hidden world beneath Pioneer Square. It's called the Seattle Underground. Old signs, old brickwork, glass tiles in the sidewalk above that once let light down into the passageways. A buried city right beneath your feet. Seattle rose from its own ashes, literally.
8 years after the fire, Seattle got its second massive break, and this one came from thousands of miles away.
In 1896, gold was discovered in the Klondike region of the Yukon Territory in Canada. Word spread slowly at first, but in July 1897, the steamship Portland docked at Seattle's waterfront, carrying 68 miners and more than a ton of gold. The news exploded. Across a nation that had been suffering through an economic depression, the idea of going north and striking it rich was irresistible, and Seattle's Chamber of Commerce was ready. They launched an aggressive marketing campaign, positioning Seattle as the one and only gateway to the Klondike, the closest major American port to Alaska, the place where you bought your supplies, booked your passage, and set off for fortune. It worked. An estimated 70,000 of the 100,000 people who chased the Klondike gold rush came through Seattle first. The city's bank deposits tripled in 2 years. Hotels were overbooked. Merchants piled goods 10 feet deep on the sidewalks. The population exploded. And here's the twist that most people don't know. Many of the men who came back from the Klondike, some rich, some broke, chose to stay in Seattle. The city had impressed them. One of those men was John Nordstrom, who invested his Klondike earnings into a small shoe store. That shoe store became Nordstrom, today one of America's most recognized retail brands. The gold rush didn't just make Seattle wealthy, it made Seattle famous. It put the city on the map of the world's imagination.
If the gold rush made Seattle rich, it was Boeing that made it powerful.
In 1916, a wealthy timber entrepreneur named William Boeing had become obsessed with aviation, reportedly after seeing a plane for the first time at Seattle's own Alaska-Yukon Pacific Exposition in 1909. He founded the Pacific Aero Products Company, soon renamed Boeing Airplane Company, in a shipyard on the Duwamish River. The early years were hard. After World War I, peace meant no more military contracts, and Boeing nearly went bankrupt. The company survived by building furniture and boats, but Boeing kept going. And then came World War II. Seattle became the manufacturing heart of the American war effort. Thousands of workers, including tens of thousands of women, poured into Boeing's factories on the Duwamish to build the B-17 and B-29 bombers that would help win the war. By 1944, Boeing employed over 50,000 people. The company's sales went from $10 million to $600 million in a single decade. After the war, Boeing pivoted to commercial aviation. It built the 707, the 727, the 747, the jumbo jet that democratized air travel and made flying accessible to ordinary people. Seattle became known as Jet City. The Boeing Company wasn't just Seattle's biggest employer. For decades, it was essentially Seattle's economy. When Boeing did well, Seattle did well. When Boeing suffered, as it did in the early 1970s, cutting 60,000 jobs, the whole city felt it. A famous billboard appeared near the highway. "Will the last person leaving Seattle please turn out the lights?" The city had learned something important. You cannot build your entire future on a single company. That lesson would shape everything that came next.
By the 1980s, Seattle was recovering. But the Boeing busts had left a mark. There was a generation of young people growing up in a city that felt economically uncertain, permanently overcast, and overlooked by the rest of America. Out of that mood came something extraordinary.
In the small bars and clubs of Capitol Hill and Pioneer Square, places like the Central Saloon, the Off-Ramp, and the Crocodile, a new kind of music was being born. Bands like Soundgarden, Mudhoney, and a scrappy quartet from Aberdeen, Washington called Nirvana, were playing loud, raw, emotionally direct rock music for crowds sometimes as small as 20 people. The music was signed to a small Seattle label called Sub Pop Records, which had the brilliant idea of marketing it to the British music press as grunge. And suddenly, the world was paying attention. In 1991, 4 albums came out in the space of a few months that would shake the music world. Nirvana's Nevermind, Pearl Jam's 10, Soundgarden's Badmotorfinger, and Alice in Chains' Dirt. 4 massive bands, one rainy city. By 1992, Nirvana and Pearl Jam were among the biggest bands on Earth. Seattle was being called the music capital of the world. Kurt Cobain's death in 1994 marked the end of an era, but grunge had already permanently changed rock music, and it had changed how the world saw Seattle. Not just a lumber town, not just a Boeing town, but a place with culture, with attitude, with a voice. Even as grunge was fading, something else was quietly building in the shadows. Microsoft had been founded in 1975 by Bill Gates and Paul Allen, 2 young men who had grown up in the Seattle area. Through the 1980s and 1990s, Microsoft grew into one of the most powerful companies in the world, and it built its headquarters not in Seattle proper, but in the suburb of Redmond. Then, in 1994, a young man named Jeff Bezos quit his job on Wall Street, drove across the country, and set up a company in a Bellevue garage. He called it Amazon. He was selling books online. Within a decade, Amazon had moved into Seattle's South Lake Union neighborhood, and it never stopped growing. The company eventually occupied more office space in Seattle than the next 40 largest employers in the city combined. Cranes rose everywhere. Gleaming glass towers replaced old industrial buildings. The Spheres, Amazon's extraordinary glass domes full of tropical plants, became Seattle's new symbol. The tech boom brought enormous wealth. It also brought enormous tension. Average rents in Seattle more than doubled. Low and middle-income residents were pushed out of neighborhoods their families had lived in for generations. The city that had once been home to working-class Boeing families was increasingly a city for highly paid engineers and tech workers.
Seattle was grappling with the same question that the gold rush had first raised over a century earlier. When prosperity comes fast, who gets to share in it?
Today, Seattle is one of the most economically powerful cities in America. It is the home of Amazon, the hub of a thriving aerospace industry, and the base for global brands like Starbucks, which opened its first store at Pike Place Market in 1971, and Nordstrom, whose fortune traces back directly to a Klondike miner's gamble. It is a city of stunning natural beauty, ringed by mountains, water, and the ancient forests that first drew settlers here. A city famous for its coffee culture, its rain, its music, and its independent spirit. It is also a city still asking hard questions about affordability, about who belongs, about how to grow without losing what made it special in the first place. The city that began as New York Alki, New York by and by, never became New York. It became something entirely its own, a city that burned and rebuilt, that found gold in other people's dreams, that built the planes that changed the world, that screamed into a microphone and made a generation listen. And that quietly became the place where the internet was turned into a business. Seattle didn't just survive its history, it was shaped by it. Every transformation left a layer, and those layers, stacked on top of each other like the streets above Seattle's underground, are what make this city what it is. And that's the story of Seattle, a city that has reinvented itself more times than almost any other in America, and still isn't done.
Now I want to hear from you. Seattle has had so many defining moments. The fire, the gold rush, Boeing, grunge, Amazon. Which chapter of Seattle's history do you find most fascinating, and why? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe to Narek Explores. We do this every week, and next time we're going somewhere equally extraordinary. I'll see you there.